reconvene our October 28th Board of Education regular meeting. Mrs. Troublefield, if you will call roll, please.
Mrs. Briggs?
Here.
Mr. Cathell?
Here.
Mrs. Klein? Mr. Neal?
Here.
Mr. Peden?
Here.
Mrs. Pryor?
Here.
Mr. Steele?
Here.
Mrs. Taylor?
Here.
Mrs. West Warner?
Here.
Mrs. Wright?
Here. Okay. We do have a quorum. I would, 3.02, entertain a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. And now if we could all stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. .04, and 3.05, I would entertain a motion to approve our regular meeting minutes from September the 23rd and our executive session minutes from September the 23rd.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 3.06, student government.
Good evening. My name is Wilson Mendoza Velasquez, and as treasurer, I am here to represent the Indian River High School Student Council. While school's only been in session for just about 2 months, our students at Indian River have not hesitated to be as productive as ever. With homecoming week just finishing, it has been a very exciting past couple of weeks. Students have been helping with their respective homecoming halls and floats, and school spirit has been very high. This school spirit can be further seen in our home football games, where our student section, alongside our amazing marching band, cheer on our football team. With the fall sports season coming closer to its end, all of our sports teams have continued to show just how great they are, as they've done in prior years. Even if it's only just October, many of our students at Indian River have begun looking towards their future. College application season is in full effect for our seniors. October 15th marked the first of many important application deadlines for many colleges that seniors are applying for. To help with this, College Application Week at Indian River has allowed students to learn about many different colleges and universities that they may consider attending, with representatives coming to the school. Alongside this, seniors and juniors have been having college trips to see any potential colleges in person. Besides college, students have been able to look towards potential careers they may want to pursue in the future. Students got to explore and speak with several career representatives at Indian River's career fair, where many stands were available to explore different jobs. Students were given a similar opportunity at the Governor's Career Expo, being able to explore jobs in several high-demand sectors, connect with employers, review resumes, and even practice interview questions. The ASVAB test was also recently taken at Indian River, with it being an important part of any student wanting to pursue a career in the military. Even with so much going on at Indian River High School, students have still found the time to give back to the community. After the devastating effects of Hurricane Helene on the people of North Carolina, several clubs and organizations at IR participated in drives to help the victims of the hurricane. Whether it was through bringing supplies, unloading trucks, or even just spreading the word about these drives, students at Indian River helped in any way they could. Students at IR strive to show excellence by participating in school spirits, sports, college, and career preparation, humanitarian aid, and so much more. Our students shape IR to be the best it can be right now and for the rest of the school year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
4.01, Special Education Ambassadors Recognition.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. We do have some very special guests with us this evening. I'd ask that you join me at the podium for the recognition, Mrs. Wright, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Wisted, who will help with the presentation this evening, and would also invite our special guest this evening, Dr. Heather Statler, who is a longtime board member for us and really was instrumental in getting the Special Ed Ambassador program off the ground for us, as well as many other programs related to our students with disabilities. So, Dr. Statler, could you also join us this evening at the podium? Thank you.
Thank you. Tonight we're here to celebrate the special ed ambassadors from the Indian River School District. I'm Melissa Wisted, and Patty Harris is here as well, our supervisor. Dr. Owens and Mr. Ivan Neal has also been a part of this, as well as Leaga Wright and Dr. Statler. So we're going to be calling names, and for each ambassador, I just want to share that we had some nominations and specific language that was sent from their nominees, which I'll quote some of them tonight. So to be an ambassador means to be a person who acts as a representative or a promoter, and each of these individuals has done just that for the students in Indian River School District. So we had many nominations to review, and we're really proud to start with the Early Learning Center. We have Jen Sumsky. Is Jen here? Great. Jen embodies the spirit for, thank you, Jen, come on up. Jen embodies the spirit for kids. She's a ray of sunshine for kids and staff alike. If teachers approach Jen about a challenge they're experiencing, she'll always take the time to sit down and truly listen to what the teacher's saying. Look for a situation from all angles and not only offer supports, but offer to come and trial those supports. She approaches all situations with kindness and understanding. From East Millsboro Elementary, we have Lori Boyce. Lori is an excellent counselor with a great skill for the profession. She comes to the table with a plethora of effective counseling strategies and techniques that she utilizes to best meet the needs of her students within the school. For Georgetown Elementary, we have Amy Timer. We are proud to honor Amy Timer as the Special Ed Ambassador for her exceptional dedication and commitment to the students in the IRAP program at Georgetown Elementary. She creates an inclusive and supportive environment for our students. Georgetown Middle, Ryan Goodwin. Ryan came into special education last school year and hit the ground running. He asks questions, is very knowledgeable with math content, and wants to ensure his students are receiving the supports they require. In addition, he's willing to help other staff members. Howard T. Ennis, Jean Morgan. Jean Morgan is one of Howard T. Ennis's bus drivers and a constant substitute. She has been a dedicated member of our school for many years. She drives our precious cargo to and from school and spends her day helping out in whatever classroom that needs help. Indian River High is Stephanie Tietmeyer. Ms. Tietmeyer has a passion for helping all her students. The way she connects with students on all levels is to be commended. She makes each student feel welcome and accommodates each student to make sure they're successful in the classroom. She supports students in the community and also on the athletic fields. Ms. Tietmeyer is a joy to have at IRHS. She always goes above and beyond. The Indian River Education Complex is nominating Tammy Hudson. Her attention to detail and countless hours spent on students' needs was evident at the start of the 24-25 school year. With a multitude of satellite locations, students with special individual needs, and extended ride times, Tammy ensured that every student's needs were met. Tammy continues to work with the Ennis staff daily and addresses concerns for our students and families. Tammy is a true ambassador of special needs students. John M. Clayton, Jan Baumhart. Jan is an advocate for all students, but especially for our special education students. She shows an incredible empathy for students and their needs and finds ways to meet them. Long Neck Elementary, Devin Petka. Devin is new to the BC setting this year, and she is a true rock star. This is a challenging year, and she has had many obstacles thrown her way. She continues to persevere with a smile on her face. She is amazing with our students and always welcoming to all. Lord Baltimore Elementary, Christine Reed. Christine goes above and beyond for her students. Her dedication and love for her students is pure and patient. It's an honor to work with such a talent and a special heart. Millsboro Middle, Lisa DeShazo. Lisa works tirelessly to support our students in 6th grade. Her classroom is welcoming, comfortable, and an engaging environment for all. She constantly works to improve her teaching in order to cater to the individual needs of her students. North Georgetown Elementary, Audrey Feltz. Audrey firmly believes in supporting the whole student. She considers the data collected from the required special education testing and carefully thinks about what students display in the academic and social settings to build supports that develop the entire student. How she incorporates these accommodations into the student's daily schedule eliminates the stigma often felt about specialized instruction at the upper elementary level. Even after supporting students, she openly offers her expertise in a supporting learning environment for all students at North Georgetown. Philip Schau, Melanie Hall. Miss Melanie is the first to jump in and help any student in our classroom. She is attentive to the unique needs of our students and has such a calming presence in the classroom. Miss Melanie holds our kids at high expectations and supports as needed to ensure that every child is making progress at their individual pace. Selbyville Middle, Teresa O'Shields. Teresa is very patient when working with students and reassuring them as they enter middle school. Southern Delaware School of the Arts, Michelle Mitchell. Michelle can always find a way to connect with a child in need and ensure any issues are appropriately handled in a safe manner. With that knowledge, she has come to the system with a fierce, compassionate advocate for what students need to be their best selves, no matter what the obstacles they may face. Michelle is quick to collaborate with the entire school team to tap into the expertise of the whole student. Students feel comfortable with her, families know that she will guide them to an appropriate resource, and fellow staff know that Michelle always has the best interests of all students at the core of everything she does. Sussex Central High, Jack Roach. Jack has been an advocate for special education students since the first day at Sussex Central High School. He's been instrumental in the social and academic growth of the students in the life skills class. He takes time to get to know his students and creates a special relationship with them that fosters trust and respect. Anyone that knows Jack can attest to his commitment to special education, and it is evident in his daily interactions with students. And finally, our community member is Dr. Statler. She's being recognized this year as a community member due to her efforts in originating the program and her support to special education ambassadors since 2017.
Wait, I don't want to do this.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Time goes.
How many years ago was that? Oh my goodness. That was awesome.
Okay, before inviting our next honoree up this evening, I'd like to share a few words. On October 5th, the district hosted its first ever We Are IRSD Festival on the campus of Sussex Central High School. And I couldn't have been more pleased with the turnout from the community, our staff, our families. Hundreds of local residents turned out for a morning and afternoon of food, games, giveaways, prize raffles, entertainment from the district students, and more. I was filled with great pride watching our bands entertain and our choir students sing from throughout the district, showcasing their many talents. This evening, we were able to, over the course of that day, we're able to capture lots of images, and today we have a 3-minute video that we'd like to share with our board and those in attendance this evening. So if you could, give us just a second and we'll get the video queued up. But it really highlights that day and how special it was. So we are very appreciative of the local vendors that came out to support our schools during our event on October 5th. I'm also grateful for our dedicated school administrators, our staff, our support personnel who set up tables and fun activities for our students and families. Our district supervisors worked together to secure multiple free giveaways for families, which included backpacks, school supplies, and T-shirts to share their IRSD pride. And coordinating an event of this magnitude involves months of work behind the scenes in order to make something this large happen. So right now, I would like to ask Ms. Nika Reed to join me on the stage, please. She likes to work behind the scenes, but she's going to be forced to get up here with us here this evening. Nika, come on up. Nika is our supervisor of support services. For her tireless work and planning and serving as the point person for our community festival, we felt the absolute need to recognize her here this evening. This started as an idea with some of our teams, and Nika really took the bull by the horns and said, let me lead some of this work. And it was a lot of work, let me tell you, and she will tell you that. But as you can see, a lot of very happy people there on October 5th. So I want to highlight some of the responsibilities that she took on leading up to that event. She facilitated the equity steering group in the planning and organization of the day's event, including the creation of the We Are IRSD flyer, logistics for maps for participants with layouts of the event, set up and cleaned after the festival, staffing needs. She took care of all of the needs related to all of the staffing associated with the event, including custodians, constables for the day. Mrs. Reed made contact with our school teams to set up tables for the event and donations of a themed basket from each school for the participants' raffle. She also made contact with a variety of vendors and community partners to attend this event. Mrs. Reed worked with Mr. Toomey to organize the support food truck vendors and worked with Mr. Tidwell to provide transportation services for our families. She secured a large donation of chicken from Mount Air Farms that we were able to give away for free to all of our participants. Additionally, she worked with our FFA and another local business to cook the donated chicken for the event. Mrs. Reed arranged the DJ for the event, who was one of our staff members, by the way, and promoted the event on our district's podcast, social media, and did interviews with local news stations. Nika, please accept this gratitude from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the district. We are so appreciative of you allowing this to work so well. It exceeded all of our expectations because of your leadership. Thank you so much.
At this time, we come to our point in the meeting where we're open for public comments.
No one signed up.
Okay. We have no one on record for signing up. If there's anyone that wishes to come forward, please do so at this time. We would ask for your name, please. And the school board welcomes the opportunity to hear from the public during our public comment session at the beginning and end of each public session. Members of the public speaking as individuals or a member who represents an organization will be allotted up to 3 minutes. As per board policy BDDH, in order to comply with the First Amendment, the board will not entertain protracted public comment within favor of or against a staff member. If a speaker makes defamatory statements or invades the privacy rights of a student or employee, the speaker is responsible for such statements and may be held liable. We thank you for adhering to this policy when sharing your public comments.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it 3 minutes because I'm kind of chatty sometimes. Good evening, my name is Patricia Jennings. And looking in the mirror and watching my hair turn from a light brown to a soft gray or white, I knew time was sneaking up on me. It's come time for me to retire. As of November 30th, 2024, I plan to retire from the Indian River School District. Teaching has been more than a chosen profession for me. It has been my life's dream. One of the greatest pleasures of my life has been to work for the Indian River School District. In addition to my church family, most of my friends are former or current employees or parents of the Indian River School District. As a lifelong educator, I have had the opportunity to witness the successes of former students. As many of my contemporaries retired, I was elated to observe former students comfortably take their places in the classroom, like Betsy Baer, Teresa O'Shields, Mackenzie Webb, I don't know her new last name, and Eric Savdar, just to name a few. Luckily, this profession offered me the ability to see this succession. It makes me smile. Although much their senior, I'm proud to say that former students call me friend as well, at least in my presence they do. As I go about the business in the community, I'm happy to see former students call me friend as well. I'm happy to see them. Honestly, most of the time, I can still match a name with a face. I admit that I do watch a lot of TV and feel that I will be open, if needed, to take Prevagen. Several years ago, Celeste Bunning offered me the opportunity to welcome new educators into the district. I will forever be grateful to her affording me this opportunity to personally welcome new educators into the profession that I love and into a district that I love. I thoroughly enjoyed working with Lori Hudson and Dr. Alexis McLeish to make Indian River's New Educator Weeks the best in the state. Over the years, it was nice to hear new hires share that the Indian River School District was super and that they had never felt more welcome in their careers. Imagine my tremendous joy when my daughter entered the teaching profession, specifically the Indian River School District. She has a true passion for her students and is currently in Burroughs, Alaska, participating in a science teacher workshop. I know her 8th graders at Georgetown Middle will have a better understanding of climate differences and subsistence living. She's posting crazy pictures like driving a dog sled team, swimming in the Arctic, witnessing a whale hunt and sampling fresh whale meat, as well as taking pictures of polar bears and moose. Although I'm somewhat sad to close this chapter of my life, as I stated earlier, I'm grateful for all the joy my tenure with the Indian River School District has afforded me. I will miss my contributions to the field of education. I will miss working with the Indian River School District. I would like to add just a few comments. Yes, I have been known as being chatty. I will always think of Connie Pryor when I make my husband a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, because when anybody asked her when grilled cheese and tomato soup was on the menu, she would say, yes, we're having blood and rubber today. Some of you may not know this, but for 22 years, I was the state student council advisor. How many people can say that they paid to dry clean Tom Carper's suit jacket? It went like this. Christine Orendorf Kerr was sitting at the head table in a room of 300 plus student council officers from throughout the state. I was a few people down in the head table. I saw her staring at a fancy little dish called chocolate mousse in a cute little cup. It was very firm. She tilted the glass to the left. She tilted it to the right. And then, being the inquisitive 8th grader, She turned it upside down and splat. You can see where this went. The mousse splattered all over Tom Carper's suit jacket. I had to explain to Marge Orndorff, her mother, about this experience, but I do want to say Christy was an awesome officer. She did a nice job. A little fun fact. I just remodeled my kitchen, the entire kitchen, but have always enjoyed having someone else prepare my meals. One of the benefits of having relationships with my former students is this. I'm convinced that my former students load on extra topping and extras when I order a breakfast sandwich or anything at Hawker's Dairy Market. I'm not sure Gerald Hawker or Melissa Hawker-Willie need to know about this, though. As the cheerleading advisor for 24 years, back in the day when I was thin and could demo a decent jump and split, a specific talented cheerleader stands out in my mind, a little Spitfire, Anita West Werner. That girl was so little she could climb on top of any stunt that we put out there for her and was happy to do it. I've enjoyed working with many principals at Selbyville Middle School. Every time I have a birthday, I think of you, Ivan Neal. We share the same birthday. And I have to say, working under Jason McCready's leadership has been a pleasure for me as well. I will share with you an agreement that I asked him to make with me. I asked him to stay at Selbyville Middle School until I retired or died. Luckily, I'm retiring. That man kept his word. Now, I did give him permission to leave whenever he wanted after I left, but I think he's a company man and enjoys the district as much as I do. I think he's planning to stay for a long time. One last thing that Jason did was so cute. I was on my way to Salisbury about 3 weeks ago to have my car serviced. I pulled over the side of the road just as you are heading into Gumboro, and to ask my daughter what she wanted from Olive Garden. And I get this text from Jason. He's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Sure." He said, "Officer Tyler Bear just texted me and said you were pulled over on the side of the road. Are you sure you're okay?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm fine." But that's the kind of guy he is. That's the kind of people that I have worked with over these many years. So respectfully, thank you, school board members, parents, students, everybody left already though, and administration in the room. You are a part of something big. You are a part of something great. And I have appreciated being an employee of the Indian River School District. Thank you. Was I 3 minutes?
And now we will move on to new business, 6.01, district finances.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Good evening. The presentation you have on board docs is about our district finances, split into 3 parts where we've been since the prior current expense referendum in 2017 where we were to where we've been since then, and then going forward. So
Mrs.
slide.
Smith, sorry, you should
Yeah.
have a hard copy in your packets, board members.
So slide 2, just a little background on current expense or operating referendum cycles. So typically, when a referendum is passed, that allows a district to build up a reserve of funds that the district will use for several years for operations. Then, as time goes on, you kind of plateau with your revenues versus expenses, and then you start spending into the reserve. It's a natural cycle that all districts in Delaware live through. Through fiscal year 2022, our district was in the accumulation phase since the last referendum that was passed on March 2nd of 2017. Then in fiscal year '23, we began operating in a budget deficit. So that's when we started seeing the reserve fund supplements in our district operating budgets. Again, normal cycle, that's how districts operate in Delaware. Typically, a current expense referendum lasts about 5 to 7 years, depending on the district, depending on the needs, depending on the growth and all kinds of other factors, but we will typically say 5 to 7 years. The next slide, page 3, gives a breakdown of the previous current expense operating referendums in this district. So I don't have records prior to 1996, but there was one in 1996, followed up 8 years later by one in 2004. Then 2 years later, there were two passed in 2006. I believe that was 2 questions on the same ballot. And then 7 years later, one in 2013. 4 years later, the last one in 2017. So entering this winter, we will be 8 years post the last current expense referendum. And that tax receipt totals the $2.35 that you see on our annual tax warrants. So starting with 2017 and where we were, you'll see on slide 5 that at June 30th, 2017, the district had a reserve balance of about $2.1 million. At the time, the total operating budget was $149.5, and the reserve represented about 1.43% of that budget. That was obviously after the last referendum had passed, but with the tax collection cycle, the board approves the tax warrant typically every June. It's submitted to the county in July, and then those tax collections are on the bills that go out in August, and the tax collections start coming in September, and then October, and so on. Slide 6 shows the last current expense referendum on March 2nd, 2017, and the question that was posed to the taxpayers at that time. It was to increase the tax rate by 49 cents per $100 of assessed value. And what the district was looking to use the funds for was 33 cents to support student enrollment growth. And then the remainder, 8 cents for student safety and 8 cents for student services and support, created those local referendum funds that we go through every month. One, to pay for local costs of safety and security for our constables and our SRO contracts, and that was prior to the state safety and security grant funding. And then 8 cents goes in, really 7 cents goes into curriculum and technology fund, and then 1 cent into student activities. Now, moving on to where we've been, so 2018 through 2024. Slide 8 is a breakdown. You've seen this before in the budget, the preliminary and final budgets. It's a breakdown of our assessed property value growth since FY 2016. So you'll see that the percentage growth there every year, it averages about 3.4% each year that our property values increase, which also equates to an increase in the tax collections. The next slide shows our capitation growth. Again, has an average about 4.9% since 2016. And that, again, is, we earn additional dollars from that growth because each capitation is charged at $7. The next slide, slide 10, shows the historical tax rates. So you can see with the percentage over the prior year tax rates and how that changed. Obviously from 2017 to 2018, and that top line is fiscal year, so that would be the 2017 tax bills. You can see the prior year of $2.57.8 up to $3.09.7. That jump is from that referendum passage. And then going forward with that, the fluctuations there are based off of any changes to debt service, tuition and minor cap, which you can see the increase in 2021 was from the passage of the referendum for the new Sussex Central High School and the bond issuances there in 21, 22, and 23. Again, for this past year, we talked in June and we held the rates steady going into this fiscal year. The next slide, slide 11, shows the FY25 tax rates for all of the other Sussex County districts, which you can see in our district, we are about 77 cents less than Cape Henlopen at $3.23.4, with Cape Henlopen at $4.0282. And feel free to please stop me with any questions as we move along. The next slide, slide 12, shows the changes in enrollment and units since 2017. So as you know, every year we do our September 30th unit count that generates, based on our enrollment, the units, the Division I units that we have to hire each year. So if you look here, and we'll get into the details in this in a little bit further slides, the student population in the 16-17 school year was 10,465. This year was 10,753. Now, this year's numbers have not been certified by DOE yet. We expect that in the coming weeks, but typically we haven't seen changes post September 30th. So as you can see, over that span from 2017 to 2025, we've only grown about 288 students, but it is a 2.75% increase. In contrast to that, our units in 2017 were 792.45 and moved to 902.46 this year. That's a growth of 110.01 units, or about 14% over that time period. Again, we'll get into the whys in the future slides. However, just taking that additional growth of 110 units at today's cost of a teacher salary, master step 10, which is about the average that we use for other calculations and other funding lines that come from DOE, and including the other employment costs, that equates to $10.8 million in total. On the local side, that's $3.6 million with the OECs. So again, significant increase in cost there. The next slide, slide 13, shows the same breakdown for our related services units that we earn based off of the number of units we had of basic, intense, and complex special education students. So back in 2017, we had 68.16 units, and for this year, 95.21. So that's a growth of 27 units and about 40%. Again, equating that to today's dollars, that's an increase of about $2.7 million total, about $900,000 of which is local costs. Next slide, slide 14, are mental health services units. So those are new units that began in 2022. Legislatively, they started with mental health services units in elementary schools. They started in the 22-23 school year, or fiscal year 2023. Started with elementary schools, then the following year middle schools, and this is the first year for high schools. Based on those calculations, and they roll in, the divisors are over 3 years, so the divisor gets smaller, so we get more units. For this year for high school, we are getting a block grant that does not cover the 12 units that we would get per the calculations, but that is how the elementary and middle school grants rolled in as well. So next year I'm anticipating that they would be in units. But using that calculation, in 2023, we started with 22 units. Today, with the high school rolling in, that's about 52 units. So again, equating that to dollars, we're looking at $5.1 million or $1.7 million in local cost to fill those positions. The next slide, slide 15, shows unit divisor changes. So this is part of why our units have increased, even though our enrollment has held somewhat steady. So for our K-3 basic special education students, in FY22, we received 1 unit for every 12.2 students. It went to 10.2 in 23 and 8.4 in 24. So in FY22, we had 220 K-3 basic education students, and that equated at that time to 18 units, increased to, using those same numbers, 22 units in 23, and in 24, 26 units. So that is an increase of about 45% there in those units, a growth of about 8 units. Pre-K divisors changed as well. So in '23, those were 1 unit for every 12.8 pre-K students, and in '24 went to 8.4. So using the '23 enrollment of 114, we increased almost 5 units or 52%. So again, every time we increase units like that, there is a local cost for that salary since we have the state-local split on salaries. Slide 16, it's a little hard to read, but I went back to the beginning of fiscal year 2017 for our actual revenues and used the operating dollars that we get both locally and from the state. So these are not any grant funds. These are not funds that have to be used for a specific purpose, like maybe vocational dollars. These are funds that are used to fund our operations. So we're looking at our local current expense money, our local charter choice payments, which comes right off the top essentially of our local tax collections, any local interest that was earned, our indirect cost money that we receive from federal grants and nutrition services, our Division II, all other costs, state operational dollars, our state energy funds, our Division III funds that can be used for any Division I or II purpose, so essentially operating dollars or local salaries, ed sustainment funds that are essentially used for local salaries, and then in some years we had additional funds from the mid-year unit count that started a couple years ago, and if we cashed in any academic excellence units. So looking at that trend, you can see the change year over year with the carryover balance, and we'll dive deep into a few of these in future slides. But in FY17, our revenue was about $37.1 million and $54 million in FY24. The next slide shows the historical expenditures related to those same operating appropriations. So FY17, our expenses were 42.13, and then went up all the way to FY24 to 56.4. Now, I know that these slides take a lot to look at and to digest, so certainly in the future, as you look at them, please feel free to reach out with any questions if you want to know where the numbers came from or any further explanation. What I do think it's important to note, though, as we look at it, we can see since the last referendum that ending carryover balance adding up as it does over time and then starting to decline. I also find it interesting that in FY24, if we add the salaries and OECs, we're about at 46.5 million, and our local current expense collections and taxes were just over 46 million. So our expenditures are outpacing the revenues. The next slide, slide 18, shows our historical unit values since FY17. So once unit count is finalized, the units that we earn for Division II and Division III are equated to dollars to get that operational money that we just saw on the previous slide. What's important to note on this slide is since FY17, the dollars that we get for Division II, which is our state operational dollars, cannot be used on salaries, has started at $2,925 per unit and has not changed. We know that costs have increased across the board, both personally and here at the district, but we are living within those same means. In FY17, the energy dollars were actually $2,435. They decreased to $2,387 in FY18 and have stayed the same since then. Again, even though we know energy costs have skyrocketed in the past few years. Division III, what we receive for our district is $1,483, and that has stayed the same. Now, we can anticipate there may be some change with that due to the reassessment and the state working on fixing the equalization formula. The next slide, slide 19, shows the historical other employment cost rates. So as time has gone on, obviously, there are additional costs to the employer side for pension, and now, starting January 1st, the family caregiver leave. So in FY17, the rate was 31.49, and as of January 1st, it will be 33.34. That is the additional cost tacked on to salaries to pay those employer share of either benefits for pension and family caregiver leave or the employer share of payroll taxes. And the state controls that. There's nothing we can do on that. Slide 20 shows our historical healthcare costs. So I did an analysis of the healthcare costs since FY17. Interestingly enough, from FY17 to FY22, it did not change at all, the employer share that we have to pay, but increased in 23, 24, and 25. The increase from 22 to 23 was 8.67%, from 23 to 24 was 9.4%, and from 24 to 25 was 26.96%. Now, for the most part, that's not going to affect us because the state covers the healthcare costs for employees in units. However, when someone is charged to a federal grant, the federal grant eats that, which means we can do less things with the grant money because we're paying more for those costs. Same thing if someone is charged locally. The next slide, slide 21, is our annual budget reduction or give back, which we'll talk more in detail about later in this board meeting. However, I wanted to do an analysis of what that looked like since its inception in 2018. Really, it has not changed that drastically since then, but below that is a chart that shows what units we have given back every year to make up that operational dollar loss. So in fiscal year 2018, it was 25.32 units, and in last year, it was 20.12. Historically, the past few years, we've typically given back an assistant superintendent and director or supervisor position, and maybe some assistant principals, and then supplemented with teacher units or secretary or custodial, especially if we're having a hard time filling positions. The next slide, slide 22, starts some analysis of expenditure increases that I've done. So the first line there is local salaries. I did all appropriations, so it didn't matter which local fund it came out of, but I wanted to see the big picture. So in FY17, we were looking at just under $32 million in local salary costs, and in FY24, 41.3. So that was an increase of almost 9.5 million or 30% since 2017. The next line is substitute costs. I couldn't get data back from 2017, but starting in 2018, looking at all appropriations for our substitute costs and not including the OECs, we were at 1.3 million in 2018 and almost 2.3 million in 2024. That's an increase of about $948,000 or 72%. We know in that time period that the state implemented the paid parental leave, which is an amazing program for employees. However, there is a cost that comes with that for substitutes. The state does cover the substitute cost for classroom teachers, but not for anyone else. So not a para, not a teacher, not in a classroom, not a custodian, a secretary, et cetera. The next line is homebound instructors. So again, all appropriations and not including OECs, but to look at the total picture, in 2018, we were looking at $115,000 in costs, and in 24, $283,000. So that's about $168,000 increase or 147%. The next slide, slide 23, shows our charter and choice payments. So these are the local dollars that follow the student, whether they go out to another district, someone from another district comes into us, or our students go out to charter schools. So you can see from this analysis, back in 2017 through 2019, our choice dollars were negative, which meant we were sending out less students. We were bringing in more students than we were sending out. So that resulted in additional dollars flowing into us, but that stopped in 2020. So back in 2017, our total charter choice payments were about $393,000, but in 2024, we're $2.2 million. We are looking this year so far, we are in the dispute period after unit count where based on where students live or what address is showing in the system, districts can dispute and say, hey, this isn't an Indian Rivers district student, this is a Laurel student or whatever. So we're still in that dispute period, so the numbers are changing a little bit. But as of Friday, it looked like about 2.3 million for this year. Just from 27 to 2024, that was an increase of 1.8 million or 358%. What's happened during that time period, we had SAS open up, I think Originally, they were, Dr. Owens, you might be able to help me here, just high school or just middle school and high school. They added elementary a few years back. We had the Sussex Montessori School open up as well, and this year, the Brian Allen Stevenson School. On the next slide, 24, we're looking at utility costs and compared to the state energy funding. So from FY 2017, $2.6 million in utility costs to $3.4 million in 2024. That's an increase of $772,000 or 30%. Where if you look at the next line, our state energy funding was at 1.9, just under $2 million, and is just over $2 million for 2024. So that's only increased about 2.5%, and therefore has not kept up with the pace of the rising utility costs. And then the last expenditure increases slide, number 25, shows an analysis of private transportation and athletic transportation. So private transportation in 2017 was about $476,000 and just over $1.3 million in 2024. Over that period of time, that was an increase of $863,000 or 122%. And for athletic transportation, looking at just bus contracts and our fuel man, which is our gas cards for our district-owned buses, $88,000 in 2017 to $215,000 in 2024, which is an increase of $127,000 or about 145%. So all of that data analysis to show where we're being hit hard on the expenditure side with cost increases and inflation. So slide 26 shows our reserve balances from June 30th, 2018 to June 30th, 2024 compared to the total budget. So of course, showing that normal referendum cycle, the reserve went up, the percentage went up, and it is declining at this point, resulting in a reserve balance on June 30th of 2024 of just under $13 million as compared to our budget of $224.5 million.
Excuse me, Mrs.
Sure.
Smith. How much reserve do we need to carry us over through the summer until our tax receipts come in?
So dollar-wise, I would have to get you that number. I don't know off the top of my head. Delaware code says you should have, I believe it's a month's worth of payroll, but we know that we have to make payroll in July, August, and September before our October collections come in. There is no state mandate on what that percentage should be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next slide, 27, just to show another thing that's hitting us this fiscal year is we had 3 rounds of ESSER funding related to COVID. That was $45.6 million we received since July 2020, and the last round of that expired September 30th. We were able to take $5.75 million in indirect costs off of that grant, which did help supplement our budget and payroll needs. So the next section is where we're going 2025 and beyond. So the things that we are looking for the future is the recruitment and retention of staff, looking at our staffing resources and what we need. We are currently working through contract negotiations with almost all of our groups. We are looking at EPER pay and the schedules there and the things that we need for our student activities and athletics, and then our substitute rates. The minimum wage is set to go up again January 1st. I believe that's the last time it's going up in the cycle unless there's more legislation passed. But with that, our substitute rates from the state increase. So next month, we'll be bringing you the substitute schedule and what the rates are. We do pay a premium above those state rates for both retired teachers and long-term subs, and so we can remain competitive and get substitutes in our classrooms. Next up is the capitations that we charge. So it's a bit of an antiquated process. And what we're going to be looking at is integrating that with the property taxes. The capitation number is a little bit of a flux it's based on the number of adults in each household. So we're going to be looking at integrating that with the property taxes. It'll actually reduce the tax burden on residential property owners and equitably distribute that to all tax bases, including commercial properties. Slide 31, looking at our increased needs, and these are things that we've brainstormed internally, but certainly if anyone else has any ideas or concerns, please feel free to reach out. But what we're looking ahead for is our new Sussex Central opening. So we know that that building will have greater square footage than the current Sussex Central High School and will, at a bare minimum, qualify for additional custodians. Again, we have the state unit for that. The state pays about 70%. We have the local salary dollars associated with those. And we know that the utility costs will be higher as we're opening a building with increased square footage. Again, I know you probably get tired of hearing me say this, but our state energy dollars are based off of units, not square footage of the buildings we're conditioning. So we're not going to magically get 200 or 2,200 students when we open that building. We're just shifting our resources, so we will not get additional energy funds for that building. Then our Millsboro Middle replacement. What does that look like in the future? What will we be putting in that school? So there could be conversion costs, like maybe playground equipment, depending on the grade levels that go in there. We may need to do things like data line replacement, especially while it's empty, to make sure that our data lines are all modernized. Additional staffing as it relates to opening a new building could be obviously a principal, an assistant principal, at least one. It will depend on the units. We'll have additional custodians, a nurse, nutrition services, constable, and I'm sure other positions. We'll have additional utility costs, of course, because we'll have an additional building to heat and light. And then operational costs like copier leases, more trash pickup, phone and data line service, custodial supplies, a school budget, grounds maintenance, transportation. So we'll be looking at what those will look like for the future. Moving ahead, in January of 26, the Delaware paid caregiver leave starts. So we anticipate we'll have additional substitute costs as our employees take advantage of that benefit. That will allow families to have at least a partial paid leave to care for family members, whether it's a parent or a sick child, not just the paid parental leave portion. And looking at our student activities, that's where 1 cent of our local 2017 referendum funds go to. We've seen an increase in requests over the past few years. We know travel costs are up, and our students are doing amazing things in traveling around the country to show off their skills. So we have increased needs there. And then for safety and security funds, increased salary needs, including overtime pay for our constables. Some of the challenges that we're going to run into as we go through this process is looking at reassessment. So we know that next year is the first year with the new reassessment for our property values. Delaware Code states that we can collect no more than 10% of the previous year's revenue collection. So we'll be bringing that back to the board in the spring to have that discussion on what you all choose to do with the tax rates. But obviously we know people's property values on their houses are going to change, and that's going to present some challenges there. As I mentioned earlier, our Division III equalization money, the state will be updating that formula and that process with the reassessment. So it's not been updated, I think, for like 20 years because the property values were not reassessed and were not modern. So we know that they're looking at that. And as a quote-unquote property-rich district, we may not have that line of funding in the future. I do not know exactly what that will look like, but we know there's going to be something. The next slide, slide 34, shows our projected revenues from 25 to 29. Back on the last revenue slide, the historical revenue slide on slide 16, I highlighted fiscal years 22, 23, and 24 because those are the years that I used to determine the projections of revenues and expenditures going forward, knowing that a lot has happened since 2017, since the last referendum, and knowing that post-COVID prices have skyrocketed. So with that on the revenue side, it's about 3.55% increase. And on the next slide in 35, it's about 7.4%. And we use that there to analyze to apply that to both salaries and non-salary expenses. Again, this is a projection, but what it shows is starting in FY 26, even with our carryover balances, we will be operating in a deficit with no carryover balance to tap into. And then gets progressively worse the next 3 years. Slide 36 shows our debt service reductions over the next 5 years. So we know, when we may set a tax rate at this level, but if one of our tax rates is decreasing, that impact is not as great. So in 2025, we have about just under $6 million in principal and interest payments on our debt. We will be paying off one bond this year, and between that and the lowered interest payments will drop us about $588,000 in 2026. We'll retire another one, and will drop us about $428,000 in 2027, and then we'll drop another one. We don't drop any more for a few years, but you can see the decline in debt service there. Slide 37, cost savings and future planning. So things that we're going to need to discuss and look at is, are we going to delay purchases? Do we know that there are major purchases or large purchases that we need to make that we just will have to push off to the future? Looking at replacement schedules for some of our larger equipment and purchases. Is there something that we can do to smooth out the cost so we don't have a roller coaster of a huge expense one year and no expense for several years? And then looking at budget cuts. Do we look at travel without students and cutting that, and we only allow travel with students, and any other thing that we can think of that will help the situation. And then last but not least, looking at current expense referendum for sometime this winter or spring to generate additional revenue to cover costs. And last but not least, the last 3 slides, 38 through 40, is an analysis of our discretionary budget. Again, I think we'll need to discuss this further in more detail in the future, but I wanted you to be able to see what those budgets look like, and then I highlighted them, green being essential operations, so that's hitting line items like it goes through slide 41, like our legal bills that we have to pay. Our portable expenses budget has our lease payments for the modular classrooms at Sussex Central, which will be ending after next summer. Our charter choice expense that we are obligated to pay. Our district operations budget has our copier leases, our utility payments, all of those operational type things for all of our buildings. Our local transportation budget, and safety and security. Yellow highlighted items are all things that involve salaries or items in collective bargaining agreements, like our tuition reimbursement. And then highlighted in orange is restricted use, which is our vocational dollars that come from the state based on the units that we generate. So that's not anything that we can cut or would save us. So I know that was a lot. But certainly, if anyone has any questions now or as you digest this in the future, please feel free to reach out.
Board members have any questions, concerns, comments?
You said something about, at some point, revenues would not keep up with, what year did you say that was?
Well, we're really at that point now as far as our local tax collections compared to like just salaries and OECs, but projecting the revenues and expenses out based off of the last 3 years, our carryover balance will be negative at the end of next year, fiscal year 2026.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for the time and work you put forth in preparing all this information. And I think it gives us a lot to look at as far as the data and making important decisions that need to be made now.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Any other comments, questions? I would just leave you with one that's, those of you that are in the audience, the majority of you are employees, but we do have the press here, that based on the information that Tammy has provided us, and it's taken her a while to formulate it, it's obvious, the writing is on the wall. A referendum is lurking in the background. So some always question what happens if it doesn't pass, if we don't have everybody behind it to support it when we do actually come up with a figure. then you can put it out there now that there will be reductions. So we will be working in the near future to come up with an amount that we think we'll be able to go to the taxpayers for. But right now, our finances are not, I mean, we're good for the year. If and when it comes to it, that you get memos from the finance office or whoever they come from that says we're going to scale back on purchases, travel, overtime, whatever, don't be offended by it and don't get angry with Tammy. Tammy has a job to do, and that's what she's going to do. And we as a board will support her in whatever she deems necessary that has to be done.
Thank you.
Now we will go on to 6.02, school choice applications for the 24-25 school year. Mr. Lewis?
Good evening, everyone. On your board docs this evening, you will see a total of 9 school choice applications, and we are asking to accept all 9 of those applications.
I make a motion that we accept those applications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. 6.03, Bass Charter School parent request to re-enroll students in the Indian River School District. Dr. Owens.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Yes, we do have a new charter school, Brian Allen Stevenson School of Excellence in Georgetown, and some of students that were currently in our district are enrolled in that school currently. And we do have some requests for return at this time. And I'd just like to share Delaware Code around charter schools and students who may want to return. And that's under Title 14, Section 506. And it reads, "A pupil accepted for enrollment in a charter school pursuant to this chapter shall remain enrolled therein for a minimum of 1 year unless during the 1-year period good cause exists for the failure to meet this requirement." The definition of good cause is provided within the code and indicates a student, one of the provisions is a student may withdraw from the charter school if there's mutual agreement between the board of directors of the charter school and the board of the receiving district, which would be us, and the parents or guardians of such children for the termination of the enrollment within that 1-year period. So we are presenting this information to the board this evening for discussion and potential action on the requests that we've received thus far for students that are asking to return. And I believe currently it is 3 students that have been released from the charter school that have asked to come back. We would need board action on that for either those 3 or moving forward our operating procedures around students that may want to return.
Okay.
I make a motion that we accept the students and going forward to be consistent, giving you the authority to accept them as they come.
If they qualify for that acceptance back. Okay.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 6.05, 24-25 unit count summary.
Yes, as Mrs. Smith presented tonight, we were right around where we were last year with the unit counts. We were going to share the certification of said units. However, that has not occurred yet, as Mrs. Smith indicated. So we will come back in December once that certification has occurred, so we can share the actual units and the total student enrollment.
All right. 6.06, name of Indian River School District new middle school.
Could we go back to 6.04, Mrs.
sorry.
Wright?
6.04, I'm sorry. American Education Week resolution.
Thank you. Yes, American Education Week is November 18th through the 22nd, and I would like to read the proclamation that is up for consideration this evening. Whereas throughout American history, schools have helped democratize our nation, strengthen our communities, and widen opportunities for all people. And whereas by integrating different groups through commonly shared values, schools prepare this nation's diverse population to live harmoniously in a democratic society. And whereas education employees strive continuously to serve our children and our communities with dedication, professionalism, and compassion. And whereas for generations, our schools have answered the call to cultivate the future leaders of our families, our communities, and our nation. And whereas there is no greater legacy than the sound education of our children. Now, therefore, the Board of Education of the Indian River School District hereby proclaims November 18th through the 22nd, 2024 as American Education Week, and that is signed and dated today by myself and Board President Mrs. Wright.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to accept that resolution.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 6.06, name of Indian River School District New Middle School.
Yes, as we've talked about this evening with Mrs. Smith's presentation, once we vacate the current Sussex Central High School, we will be moving in the current Millsboro Middle School into that vacated location. So we do need to consider the name of the new middle school. We have discussed this at our Futures Committee. Some of you were able to be present for some of that, and overwhelmingly, the Futures Committee felt that the appropriate name would be Sussex Central Middle School at the new site there on Patriots Way. As you know, we did have a Sussex Central Middle School some time ago, so I think it is appropriate to consider bringing that name back for our new middle school. We are continuing to work with Department of Ed around logistics with school changes, the codes, et cetera, but we do want to bring that before the board this evening for consideration. And again, the recommendation would be to change that name to Sussex Central Middle School.
Any questions? Concerns or comments? I would entertain a motion that the school name be Sussex Central Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 6.07, uniform Sussex Central High School boys basketball.
Thank you. We shared these during our recent committee meetings. Within board docs, you will see the cost associated with the uniforms as well as the pictures of the uniforms. They are blue and gold for Sussex Central and white, and they do have the American flag that we've asked to be placed on our competition uniforms.
Okay, any questions, concerns, comments? I would entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 6.08, uniforms for Sussex Central High School dance.
Yes, again, those are within your board docs. They do meet our color schematics. I will say that we did have a question during committee meeting around the American flag being on these. Historically, the American flag has not been on our dance uniforms, and there's some concern with certain materials that are used with these particular uniforms and with the ability to place that flag on there. So I would make a recommendation to move forward with these.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 6.09, uniforms for Georgetown Middle School wrestling.
Again, they're illustrated within your board docs. They do meet our color criteria for Georgetown Middle School.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is
Opposed.
I'm sorry?
Opposed.
Can you pull the board?
Mrs. Briggs?
No.
Mr. Cathell?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Peden?
Yes.
Mrs. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes.
Mrs. Wright?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no, 0 abstentions.
That passes by majority vote. 6.10, Sussex Central High School change orders. Mr. Dooley and Mr. Brad Cowan.
Good evening. In your board docs, there is a summary chart listing this month's construction change orders for the new Sussex Central High School Major Capital Improvements Project. All of these change orders have been presented before the Buildings and Grounds Committee. 2 of these change orders are above the change order preliminary approval thresholds, thus requiring school board approval. Mr. Brad Cowan with Richard Y. Johnson Construction is here to review these 2 change orders and respond to any questions you might have. Mr. Cowan?
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everyone. Start with the 2 that require board approval. The first one, general conditions for Richard Y. Johnson. Early on in the project, we carried in the project budget a cost for a number of items to prepare the site, meaning moving the mobile classroom units, moving the existing baseball field to the north side of the school, and then also working with DP&L to relocate transformers and underground electric services in preparation for the new school. So those items were carried in our budget. However, as we move forward, we were asked to pay for those items through our general conditions, which we did. So what we're asking for tonight is for our general conditions to be increased, and then the budget would just be zeroed out on that side. So really, it's just a matter of transferring funds from the budget to the general conditions, and it's a 0 increase to the project. So it's just we need to go through that process and have board approval to make that transfer. And that's what we're asking for approval on that particular item this evening.
Any questions? I'd entertain a motion.
I recommend we do this transfer.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous.
Thank you.
6.11, Sussex Central High School change order notifications.
Oh, we have one more for
I'm
board
sorry.
approval. One more. This one is for Corrado Construction. Through our continued efforts with saving money and finding value engineering items, we're able to irrigate the 4 new fields, meaning the 2 softball fields and the 2 baseball fields, along with the multi-purpose field, which is at the south end of the new gymnasium, and also one of the practice fields. So we ran, if you remember, we ran a 6-inch water line out there. That was approved by the board a few months ago, and now we're able to find more money within the contingency and value engineering to irrigate all of those fields. So we're asking for board approval for that irrigation change order this evening.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Now, 6.11, Sussex Central High School change order notifications.
Yes. So these are all within the limits of Dr. Owens and Mr. Dooley, and they have been put on the board docs for notification, and there's a number of them here, and if you have any questions on any of them, I'll be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions? I would entertain a motion to accept these notifications.
So
Okay?
moved.
And the project remains on schedule and under budget. So thank you.
Second?
So moved.
We have a second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
6.12, Title IX Coordinator.
Yes, Mrs.
Oh,
Wright.
yes, yes.
6.12, 6.13, and 6.14 are presented annually to the board for consideration, and they're the Title IX coordinator, which we are recommending Mrs. Celeste Bunting, our 504 coordinator. We're recommending Dr. Renee Jerns, and our ADA coordinator, Mr. William Joe Dooley. All those would require board action this evening.
Any question on the coordinators? I would entertain a motion to accept. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. Moving on to old business. 7.01, major capital planning.
Yes, so Sussex Central High School, the cast stonework at the main entrance is about 50% complete. It's looking good. Exterior metal panel installations continue. The gym cow wall window system is nearing completion. Mechanical, electrical, and ductwork continues in the classroom wing. Drywall, painting, and ceramic tile work also continues. The heating startup will begin this month. The kitchen equipment is being installed. I believe that's near completion as well. The auditorium sound, lighting, and rigging upgrades will be complete this week. I believe they are complete now. And I believe next month we'll be able to get back into the Sussex Central Auditorium for their regularly scheduled, either next month or the following month for a regularly scheduled board meeting. It looks really good in there. The installation of the athletic fields is continuing to progress. And our executive group continues to meet monthly with RYJ to explore cost-saving construction alternates and project obstacles. We have a meeting on site scheduled for tomorrow to review the furniture samples, and the samples will be set up to mimic the proposed layout within the school that we have previously selected. So that'll be exciting to take a look at that tomorrow. That completes my report.
7.02, Howard T. Ennis.
Yes, the contractor is very close to finishing all the punch list items at this time, and the Artesian Water is scheduled to take over the water system on November 1st. As recently as today, we had some communication with Artesian and our attorney with finalizing some of the paperwork.
7.03, GW Carver consent update. Dr. Winstead?
Good evening. Some requirements that'll continue for the remainder of the year is a quarterly update on the former Carver students. So we're getting that information collected since the quarter's ending next week. And we're going to do a continuation of the Community Advisory Board. And we selected a community member to be the president of that. And the two district plans will continue to be monitored on disproportionality for graduation rate and discipline. Any questions?
Thank you for your report. Committee reports. 8.01, Buildings and Grounds. Mr. Steele?
Thank you, Ms. Wright. The Building and Grounds Committee met on Monday, October the 14th. We discussed the major capital improvement projects that Dr. Owens has talked about tonight, the Howard T. Ennis, the new high school construction, as well as the change orders that was reviewed earlier. Also, we discussed the Buildings and Grounds Support Center. Very happy to tell you that in the last 30 days, 97 tickets were opened, 103 tickets were closed, meaning that we're starting to work on some of those backlogs, and we currently have only 24 tickets that are active. They gave us a breakdown of what we had, a lot dealing with HVAC, and had a good discussion on VRF issues that we seem to be having. Cooling tower replacement, Geip Associates will be performing final inspections on all 5 schools within the next 2 weeks. District training is going to be conducted on October the 17th. The Buildings and Ground team is pursuing pricing for the cooler tower replacement at GW Carver and Sebbyville Middle. And adding to that this evening, talking about the budget, the cooling towers and things that we're going to see in the future are going to be things that we're going to have to plan for, which was another discussion we had under new business. We talked about a large projects tool, and that is to come up with a strategic plan for replacement of some of the big dollar items that we're going to face. Even though we have new buildings, we still have some of our older buildings and even some of the mediocre buildings that we're going to have to do some of these high-end replacements. So we're going to have to keep that in mind in the future, that is going to be an expense that we're going to have to pick up. Also, one of the things that we discussed was the assistant chief custodians. For the longest time in this district and in the state, the assistant to the chief was always referred to as the fireman, which went back historically to be the person who would come in, put the coal in, do whatever needed to be done to get the building heated before the kids came. They have officially changed that from a fireman to now they are considered assistant chief custodians, and that's been a long time coming. But that was a good thing to report out on. The MOVE Committee has started with their first meeting. They have another meeting coming up on October 24th. They're going to be working as a subgroup of the Futures Committee, and they will be working for all of the moves that are going to be necessary to move into the new high school and the middle school into the new middle school. With that said, the next meeting will be held on Monday, November the 18th at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. 8.02, comprehensive school safety. Mr. Cathell?
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Just one update. Between September 30th through October the 4th, Constable Dave Lucia attended an NRA Law Enforcement Handgun Instructor Development School, which was hosted by the Ocean View Police Department. This certification will enable the constable program to have an additional firearms instructor to assist in mandated qualification and additional firearms training. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. 8.03, finance. Mr. Peden?
Yes, the Finance Committee met on October 14th. We have already previously discussed replacing Sussex Central basketball uniforms. We had also discussed the Sussex Central High School dance team replacing damaged uniforms. We have also discussed the Georgetown Middle School wrestling uniforms being replaced. And then there was a presentation on the pay options of ag teachers moving from 10-month plus 19 days to 10 plus 2, 11-month, or 12-month employees. The state allows for 12-month ag teacher positions, and therefore state funds will cover the state portion of the additional time. The local portion of the additional months would be at the district's expense. Currently, the local funds are paying 100% of the 19 additional days that ag teachers have been approved to be paid. Some ag teachers provided information on responsibilities of the ag program that require staff time during the summer season, such as caring for animals, assisting and training students for competition at the Delaware State Fair, and leadership training opportunities for the FFA program. The teachers are providing many of the services on their own personal time. Currently, the FFA program has 200 students at Indian River High School and 1,500 at Sussex Central High School. There was a request of a cost comparison between the current pay schedule and the proposed change. This will be presented at the November committee meeting. Ms. Smith provided information on the state give-back funding requirement, including the history of the annual due dates for alternative give-back plans. Ms. Smith is currently working on the Indian River School District's alternative give-back plan and will present it at the December committee meeting. The plan has been approved by the board, or the funds will be taken from the district operating funds. Later on this evening, Ms. Smith will review the financial reports that will be taken to the board for action. That concludes my report.
Thank you. 8.04, curriculum. Mr. Neal?
Thank you. The committee met on October 14th. There was a presentation about the state's efforts to get feedback on an assessment for high school use, for the high school accountability system. The administration is in the process of getting feedback from the principals, and Dr. Jones has met with them, and recommendations I think have already been given to Dr. Owens, who has to report to the state, and the final decision at some point will be made regarding next steps in that process. We also had a presentation about the district's digital learning walk tool that's utilized to get feedback about learning in our classrooms. Our next meeting will be held on Monday, November 18th at 4:30. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. 8.05, DSBA Board of Directors, Mrs. Pryor.
Our next meeting is November 6th.
Okay. 8.06, DSBA Legislative, Mrs. Briggs.
Yes, we met on Wednesday, October 2nd in Dover. There's approximately 15 in attendance. The meeting minutes from the previous committee meeting back in May were reviewed as they were previously approved by the Board of Directors in June. No vote was necessary. Mr. Tull reviewed and discussed the second half of the 152nd General Assembly. He also pointed out that the second half of the 152 GA finished on June 30th. So this concludes the 152nd General Assembly, and the 153rd General Assembly will begin January 2025. Mr. Tull reviewed with the committee the House and Senate bills from the 152nd GA with vigorous conversation and discussion from the committee members. There were new House and Senate bills that were reviewed and introduced into the General Assembly after the committee met in May. New House bills were reviewed with positions approved as follows. There was 3 House bills, 367. We had a neutral position, passed by a voice vote with Woodbridge abstaining. House Bill 368 was supported, passed by the voice vote. House Bill 421 tabled, passed by a voice vote. We had 6 Senate bills that were reviewed as well. Senate Bill 191 was tabled, passed by a voice vote. 78, we opposed, passed by a voice vote. 301, we remained neutral, passed by a voice vote. 322, we supported, passed by a voice vote. Senate 217, we remained neutral, passed by a voice vote with Appoquinimink and Woodbridge voting no. Senate Bill 328, we supported, passed by a voice vote with Cape Henlopen and Lake Forest abstaining. The committee reviewed and discussed 2 proposed bills from Senator Williams' office, one bill pertaining to the constables directing traffic, and the other pertaining to the background checks for appointed board members to go through the Board of Elections instead of the school district. These bills will probably be introduced in the 103rd General Assembly, and that'll be in January 2025. The Legislative Committee reviewed and updated by unanimous voice vote the 24-26 legislative priorities to serve as the legislative priorities for the first half of the 153rd General Assembly. The committee also agreed on a few small changes of priorities, using priorities from the 152nd General Assembly as a guide. One major addition was to add a new priority related to the burden of proof. The legislative priorities will be finalized and approved at the Board of Directors meeting on November 6th, which is Wednesday, November 6th. The meeting adjourned at around 8 o'clock. Our next legislative committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 5th, 2025.
Thank you. 8.07, Special Education Committee, Mr. Neal.
Thank you. So our former Special Education Task Force met virtually on October 18th. Dr. Wisted provided an update in terms of background with the committee, where things stood prior to, I guess, sort of a break in things that we had been doing. But obviously tonight we resumed the committee's efforts with recognition of our special education ambassadors, which was a pretty neat thing to see. We intend to continue that. We talked about some work that the district has been ongoing related to an order that the district is under. And so we reviewed those things, priorities that we're following, making sure that we're meeting those, some ongoing targets that we have as a district include things like a handbook that has to be updated yearly, process and procedures, behavior supports that we need to make sure are in place, creation of an LRE document for use throughout the school district to make sure that things are being consistent. Those are just a few of the things that we're working on. You have a copy of the minutes in your packet, the rest of our discussion. So far this year, Dr. Wisted shared that there have been 69 support service requests in IRSD schools. 40 of those were for staff support and training. 9 were for student-specific support. So obviously, there's a lot of good work going on out there. During our discussion, we felt that the original work of the Special Education Task Force has been met in terms of identifying the needs of our students and staff, as well as establishing things that we celebrate, such as the Special Education Ambassadors. So we voted as a committee to change our name from task force to committee. So moving forward, we will be recognized as the Indian River School District Special Education Committee. We will meet quarterly rather than monthly. Our next meeting will be January 24th, 2025, and those meetings, future meetings, will be in person. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. 8.08, policy, Mrs. Taylor.
So the policy committee met on October 14th at 4 o'clock, and we had a lot of policies to go over. First, we had the second readings of the following policies. JECCA, school choice. There were no additional changes, and we will proceed with the second reading. IGDJ, band and interscholastic athletics, uniforms and logos. There were no additional changes, and we're proceeding with the second reading. We did discuss the use of black athletic uniforms, which were ordered prior to the policy revision on January 30th, 2024. And their continued utilization they will be still discussed and maybe not feasible because we're going to review that at the next policy meeting. So that's not a definite yet. JG2, gang presence, promotion, and activity. There were no additional changes, and we'll proceed with the second reading. So the board will have to vote tonight to approve these 3 policies if they so choose. There are many policies under review. There are 9 of them. The first one was AC, non-discrimination, and EC, and we are going to proceed with that first reading. D, fiscal management, we will proceed with that first reading. DBH, budget adoption, we're going to continue with that first reading. GCBD, we'll proceed with that first reading. The policies that are still under review continue to GBE, staff health and safety. There were no changes, we're reviewing only. GBE1, TB audit policy, there were no changes, and we're reviewing that only. GBEA, staff property protection, no changes, review only. And then JG1, school bully and cyberbullying prevention policy, Mr. Lewis discussed minor changes in the language proposed by the attorney, and we will proceed with the first reading. The meeting adjourned at 4:24, and our next meeting is scheduled for November 18th to begin at 4 p.m.
Okay, any questions? So we need to act upon the second readings of the policies that Mrs. Taylor presented.
I make a motion that we accept those changes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Mrs. Turtlefield, will you pull the board, please?
Mrs. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Cathell?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Peavy?
Yes.
Mrs. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor?
Yes.
Mrs. West Warner?
No.
Mrs. Wright?
Yes.
That's 8 yes, 1 no, and 0 abstentions.
Okay, that is unanimous for those readings. 8.09, Futures Committee, Dr. Owens.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Yes, we did meet most recently last Tuesday, October 22nd, to continue our work through the Futures Committee. We spent some time discussing the logistics associated with the work with the Department of Ed. Mrs. Daisy is working with that team to ensure that we cover our bases in terms of coding for the school, the naming of the school, which we took care of this evening, and other logistics. So that is ongoing, and we wanted to update the committee with that. We have shifted primarily to looking at the boundaries. So the team has spent a considerable amount of time looking at what boundaries we will pull into the new middle school, not next year, but the following year, and then subsequently the new elementary school, that's still the recommendation for the vacated Millsboro Middle. So a lot of time was spent on that, and we will continue to discuss that with the hopes of coming back to the full board in December with members of that Futures Committee to present out the work that's occurred thus far and potentially some recommendations. So more to come in December from that committee. That concludes my report.
Thank you. 8.10, IREA Representative.
Good evening, Blair Catlin Brown, school social worker at Southern Delaware School of the Arts and Vice President for Teachers for IREA. Piggybacking on the conversation about the We Are IRSD event, we are so grateful that Nika Reed invited us. It really opened my eyes to how useful us being in the community can be, both for IREA and for the district. A little interaction that kind of encapsulates that. We had a married couple come up. The wife was very excited to talk to us, but the husband, it was clear he was not down for unions. And so myself and Cassie had a chat with him, and by the end, he was not only excited about what unions do, but he was like, well, maybe I'll look at some of the jobs that you guys have posted in the district, looking at some of the IT jobs or the para jobs. So like us getting out in the community is huge just for us, just so people understand what we do and what our members do. But it really is an opportunity to continue the goodwill in the community for the district as well. I think I mentioned before, but if anyone knows of any community events that you think that we could have a table at, please let us know. Like I said, it kind of sparked something in me that I was like, I see the real benefit from it. So please keep us posted. We'd love to represent the district and us out there in the community. I spoke to Cassie. She's not able to be here. Her son hurt his wrist at practice today. He's okay. But she is excited for the Professional Development Day that's going to be in January for the paraprofessionals. She's been working with Melissa Whitstead and Alexis McLeish to plan it. Very excited to make it a useful day, an informative day, a productive day for our paras that's really tailored for their needs. She wanted me to put out there that she plans to invite board members to join and some cabinet members as well, just to make sure that, again, we're ensuring that the paras are getting as much attention as some of the other units get sometimes with understanding the inner workings of the district. So her PD days and her para mentoring is really doing a lot of work out there to make paras really feel more supported in the district. It's amazing. Lastly, from a personal note, my husband is a Marine veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq, so I always try to find a way to thank our veterans, and since I have this platform, what better way? So on behalf of IREA, I want to thank all educators, all staff members, anyone who can hear my voice who is a veteran serving our community and also working with our students and here in the district. Their service is greatly valued. And thank you to those who love the veterans, because it's a hard job sometimes. We love them, but my goodness. But thank you so much, and I hope we can all enjoy our Veterans Day off and celebrate those who served. Thank you.
Thank you. .01, Superintendent's report.
Yes, within your board docs is a full listing of activities over the course of the last month. Certainly, we highlighted tonight, and Blair emphasized as well, the We Are IRSD event. We are excited to begin planning for the next event. Well, I don't know, I think Nika might want a little break a little bit, but we are going to get back to work on next year's event very soon, hopefully. One of the other highlights of this past month was myself and Mrs. Blannard and district representatives and members of the Howard Tienis team were able to accompany Deb Treherne to Dover this month, as she and the other district teachers of the year were all recognized at a really nice ceremony put on by the state. Deb wasn't recognized as the state teacher of the year, but she certainly represented us well there at a really awesome ceremony, and we're proud of Deb, and we were happy to celebrate with her in Dover earlier this month. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Financial reports, 10.01, financial summaries for month ending September 30th, 2024.
The reports on board docs are through September 30th, so we were 25% of the way through the fiscal year. Those reports have been loaded with the preliminary budget that was approved by the board last month. So we'd received 60% of our total budgeted revenue, 31% of our budgeted discretionary revenue, and 17% of our budgeted local tax revenue. Interest rates are still up, so we received $273,000 in interest in total between the district and Ennis in September. We spent 20% of total budgeted expenses, 26% of total discretionary expenses, 19% of our tuition-funded classrooms budgets, and for Howard Tienis, 25% of their budgeted expenses.
Any questions? I would entertain a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 10.02, detail information for month ending September 30th, 2024.
Our student activity funding balance is approximately $83,000. Our ESSER 3 funding, at the end of September, we had spent and encumbered $30.8 million and had $3,100 remaining. That was for a grant that extended a little bit past that time, so we've recoded all of the payroll there, and that is zero. $2.7 million in federal funds available, and we're holding approximately $1.3 million in donations and internal accounts.
Any questions? A motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 10.03, major capital improvements for month ending September 30th, 2024.
In September, we paid out $4.2 million in major cap funds. I'm also happy to report that as of last week, we received our state transfer of the market pressure fund. So we have all of that now.
Any questions? Motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 10.04, minor capital improvements for month ending September 30th, 2024.
We will not receive our FY25 allocation until November. However, of the fiscal year funds remaining, we've spent and encumbered approximately $4.3 million and had $224,000 remaining on September 30th.
Any questions? A motion to accept?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 10.05, fiscal year 2025 annual state budget reduction give back.
In Finance Committee, we had a discussion about the annual budget reduction. So I have a snippet from the budget bill that I will not read to everyone. But if anybody wants a copy of this document, just let me know. But every year in the budget bill, there are funds reserved for what we call the give back, but it's the annual budget reduction to the districts. It totals to the districts and charter schools. It totals $26 million, and it's allocated based on the prior year unit counts at September 30th. So the way it works is July 1st, we get a preload of funding into our state operational all other cost appropriation based off of prior year's numbers. then immediately what happens is the state takes the give back out of that appropriation. So we're essentially left with no state operating dollars on July 1st. There's some, but it's very minimal. And then per budget epilogue, we have until December 31st to submit a budget reduction plan to take those funds out of all other cost operating dollars and move them to other pots of money. So what we typically do is we give back some units that are unfilled, like I discussed earlier. That generally covers the vast majority of it. The budget bill sets the dollar amounts per what that value is per unit. I have come to learn over the past couple of years, because it's fluctuated, it is not based off of the salary scales or anything like that. It's actually based on the actual administrators and teachers in those positions statewide, and then they do an average. Because there was one that went down one year, so we had questions about that. We developed the give back plan with those units and then any other fund. So starting, I think, last year, we give back a little bit of other money that comes from the state that we know we're not going to use all of. So instead of allowing that to revert at June 30th and not have that lose additional money, we have put that in the give back plan, so we're not losing, we're not double dipping on the loss, I guess, is an easy way to say that. So we will bring that plan to the board at the December Finance Committee meeting, and then again to the board meeting in December to be approved. Once that's approved, we send it to DOE, and then they have until January 31st to give us the money back. So what ends up happening when we give back positions is they take those dollars out of our state's salary dollars and then put them back into our operational dollars for us to spend. So without passage of that plan and converting those dollars to units, we would have essentially no state operating dollars. And the give back is about $2 million for the district. So that's a significant impact without converting those to units. So since there's been questions in the past couple of fiscal years about the give back plan, I thought I would put that out there so that everyone understands. And certainly if you have any questions now or in the future, please let me know. But that's our renewal process. Thank you.
11.01, use of facility.
Thank you. Yes, the first 11.01 is use of John M. Clayton Elementary, October 3rd, October 22nd, and October 28th by Lighthouse Christian School, and that's for their volleyball games.
Any questions? I'd entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 11.02, field trip requests.
Yes, overnight field trip by Indian River High School baseball, March 19th to 22nd to Myrtle Beach, and overnight field trip by Sussex Central High School, March 20th, 24 to Myrtle Beach, and third overnight trip by Sussex Central Band, April 11th through 13th to Richmond, Virginia.
Okay, any questions? A motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. Personnel, 12.01, personnel agenda for October the 28th, 2024. I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda as printed minus 33 and 74.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That is unanimous. Now I would entertain a motion to accept item number 33.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Mrs. Troublefield, will you pull the board, please?
Mrs. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Capel?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Pease?
Yes.
Mrs. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Shields?
No.
Abstain. Mrs. Wright?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
That carries by majority vote. And now would entertain a motion to accept item number 74.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
The motion fails.
Roll call, please.
Do roll call, okay.
Mrs. Briggs?
No.
Mr. Cathell?
No.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Peden?
Abstain.
Mrs. Pryor?
No.
Mr. Steele?
No.
Mrs. Taylor?
No.
Mrs. Warner?
No.
Mrs. Wright?
No.
That's 1 yes, 7 no, and 1 abstention.
That motion fails to get a majority vote. We go to the personnel addendum for October the 28th. A motion to accept.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 12.03 is our contractual agenda. Any questions? A motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 12.04 is no action is required, it's just notification of retirements. 12.05, teacher contract, financial negotiations. I would entertain a motion.
So earlier this evening, we presented Proposal 1 and a Proposal 2, if the board chooses to take a vote on either.
I make a motion for Proposal 1.
I have a
Second.
motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Now we come, thank you. Now we come to the end of our meeting where we have another opportunity for public comment. No one has signed up, but if there's anyone in the audience that would like to come forward, they may do so at this time. Seeing no one coming forward, I would entertain a motion at this time to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The meeting is adjourned.